Hey everyone, so I wanted to go over the second book that I'm reading in my global economic study project. Yesterday I did a video on a book called The World's Worst Bet. That's where I started. Kind of rushed through that, but I want to go through, talk a little bit about this one. Now remember, I started this project earlier in the month, so I'm actually a few books ahead now that we're doing these daily videos. So I'll slow things down, maybe go over this book and subsequent books chapter by chapter. But for now, this is a book called King Dollar. It's one of two books that cover the role of the U.S. dollar in the international economy. And this book is written by a journalist named Paul Blustein. He I actually have several of his books. He's covered the global economy for a number of publications now for decades. And so, like The World's Worst Bet, which I covered in a previous video, it's kind of that 30,000 foot view of the global economy that journalists often have. Now, the second book on the dollar that I have in my reading list is by Ken Rogoff, who is he's an economist at Harvard and was the former head of economist of the IMF. I also finished that book, so I'm going to be contrasting those a little bit. But the premise of this book is really that when you hear in the media and other places that the dollar is the world's reserve currency, that really understates the role of the dollar in the international economy. So when we say reserve currency, that means that central banks own um, dollar reserves more than any other currency reserves, more than any other gold. Although we've seen this year, there's been a rotation into gold and kind of a diversification away from the dollar, but nevertheless, the biggest foreign dollar holdings for central banks outside of the U.S. is the U.S. dollar. But that really understates it because the dollar is the preferred medium of exchange throughout the world. So it's the denomination for oil transactions and lots of global economic transactions. So in this book, Bluestein talks a lot about how the U.S. has been using sanctions and other kinds of economic warfare. Really, it was ratcheted up uh, during the beginning of the war on terror in the early 2000s, but it's been ratcheted up a lot since then as well. And that's because the dollar-based payment system is kind of a choke point for the international economy. So Bluestein says, and this is the real thesis of his book, that the dollar is unlikely to be dethroned anytime soon, hence the name King Dollar, barring some catastrophic errors by the federal government. And to Bluestein, it's a real possibility that the government at some point or in the near future makes a number of mistakes that can dethrone the dollar. We'll talk about that more in subsequent videos. Thank you.